All right, so I'm on record saying I'm generally not a fan of contrast training. I think post-activation potentiation is a real phenomenon, but the effects are overstated. I've made my critiques of French contrast well known.
I went through that phase,
Yes.
dude. French contrast, the argument in favor of it is we're gonna do this loaded movement to potentiate your plyometrics so you can jump higher, produce more power. But if I just spend 3 to 5 minutes jumping, I'm gonna increase my jump height with each jump. I'm probably gonna reach a higher peak performance than trying to go from back squat where you're like bracing really hard.
Yep.
It's like a totally different motor pattern and you're gonna shift back and forth. You end up doing shittier reps than you would if you just did the one thing by itself.
I think if your goal of a given session or an activity is to jump high, you're better off just jumping, accruing high quality reps, or if the goal is to produce high outputs in a task, you're better off just doing the said task, getting more practice at said task, and gradually increasing intensity until you reach a satisfactory level of performance in the session. All of that is still true and I haven't changed my mind on it. However, that doesn't mean that I think contrast training is bad or it never serves a purpose. I want to go over a few different circumstances where I think contrast training is very appropriate. Contrast training can be a really good idea when you're feeling slow, tired, and lethargic. We've all had those days where for some reason we just don't have the juice. Sometimes this can be explained by poor sleep quality, poor nutrition, but honestly, most of the time it's probably not explainable. Honestly, I think poor sleep and poor nutrition is scapegoated far too often. Anyways, if you plan on jumping in your training and you don't have any pop, it can be a good idea to pair up your squatting with your jumping if that helps you wake up a little bit. Or if you're Olympic lifting and you usually do that first, but you have no pop or you're feeling slow transitioning under the bar during warm-ups, it can be a good idea to do your main strength exercise first, whether it's a squat or a pull or whatever you do, and do your Olympic lifts after. That's one example of when it's probably a good idea to use contrast training or take advantage of the PAP effect. Another good time is to use it the day of or the day prior to a competition. I actually think the PAP phenomenon is much more convincing in that 24 to 48 hour window after the conditioning activity than it is in the acute effects. I don't care what sport you play, if you do a contrast set of moderately heavy squats or Olympic lifts with some sort of plyos or short accelerations, you'll probably feel like you have an extra gear in your step later that day or the next day. But quality obviously matters here and you have to be aware of that. And you know I'm a proponent of ego lifting, but you shouldn't do any ego lifting during a contrast set with this purpose. I remember when I had my pro day for the NFL, I think the day before I hit 2 singles at 150 kilos on a clean, and the day before I also did 15-yard accelerations. And I felt really good going into my pro day the next day. I hit a 36-inch vertical on the Vertec, and my 40 was a 4.57. Finally, another really good time to use contrast training is when you're short on time. I think if you only have like 35 minutes to train and you want to jump, Olympic lift, and squat all in the same session. Maybe that usually takes 50 minutes for you to complete all of your working sets for that. Just contrast your jumps with your cleans and with your squats. During your warm-up sets for cleans, perform your jumps in between warm-up sets. And your legs will feel really good going into squats. And when you get to your warm-up sets of squats, keep doing jumps in between your sets. So those are 3 situations in which I'm all for contrast training. When you're a little bit more lethargic than usual, the day of or the day prior to a competition, and when you're short on time. And I could probably be convinced to include other situations in which contrast training is beneficial. And if you have any other ideas about it, let me know in the comments. That's all I got for the video. Thanks for watching.